They told us it would be nothing more than a listening post, an uneventful assignment tucked deep in the heart of the Amazon, far from any map, far from anything human. Operation Night Harvest, 1967. The official line was simple: monitor Soviet transmissions, jam any signals that shouldn't be there, and report anomalies to command. Nothing about it sounded dangerous, just another shadow mission buried in Cold War paperwork. But the moment we arrived, I knew Captain Elias Kane had lied when he called it routine. The base wasn't marked on any chart, not even the classified ones. Coordinates changed with every briefing as if command wanted to erase the memory of its existence before we'd even finished unpacking. 37 of us worked in rotating shifts inside a prefabricated complex surrounded by razor wire and motion sensors. The jungle pressed against the perimeter like a living organism, exhaling heat and decay through every seam. The air clung to our skin, thick and wet, the scent of rot and sap mixing with rust from equipment we could never keep dry. Every surface corroded faster than it should have, and the forest seemed to be reclaiming the metal as fast as we built it. The worst part wasn't the insects or the isolation. It was the sound, the constant, suffocating chorus of life. Screeches, chirps, clicks, wings thrumming like static. It filled your skull until silence became a myth. When the noise finally stopped, that was when the real fear began. I still remember the exact minute it happened, 0347 hours, October 12th. I was on night watch with Corporal Andrew Dalton, call sign Sparks. He was hunched over the radio console, headphones clamped tight, face pale in the dim red light. The hum of the equipment filled the comms room, a low electrical heartbeat that had become part of our nights. Then Sparks froze mid-turn. His hand hovered above the frequency knob, trembling. "You hearing that?" he whispered. I leaned closer, listening past the static. Beneath it came a new sound, faint, rhythmic, like a pulse echoing through the void. "Interference?" I asked, but Sparks shook his head. "No. This is deliberate." He adjusted the dial, and the signal grew stronger. What I thought was one heartbeat became many, overlapping rhythms layered with impossible precision, forming patterns that made my chest tighten. Then came the voices. They weren't speaking words, but they carried tone and cadence, human yet wrong, like the forest itself was whispering through a broken throat. Sparks's voice dropped to a rasp. "Get Kane, now." Kane arrived less than 2 minutes later, uniform crisp despite the hour, his presence filling the small room. He listened to the transmission for 30 seconds, face unreadable, then picked up the internal comm, "All personnel, alert status Bravo. Sergeant Moreira to comms immediately." Luis Moreira was our Brazilian liaison, a man who'd grown up in river villages before joining the army. He respected the jungle in a way we never did. When he entered and heard the signal, his face drained of color. "Turn it off," he said quietly. Kane's tone hardened. "Explain." Moreira's eyes flicked toward the speaker, his voice low and steady. "There are stories out here. Sounds that call to people. If you listen too long, you start walking. You don't come back." Sparks ripped the headphones off like they were burning his ears, but the sound kept spilling from the speakers, those heartbeats merging into one deep, throbbing vibration that seemed to crawl under our skin. Kane didn't move. "Can you trace it?" Sparks hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead. "Maybe, if it's close enough." Kane nodded once. "Do it. I want coordinates by dawn." The rest of that night stretched like a fever dream. Sparks worked the controls, hands shaking, eyes locked on the shifting frequencies. Moreira stood by the door, whispering a prayer in Portuguese. I stayed at the window, rifle ready, staring into the black jungle that pressed against the fence. Nothing moved. Not the leaves, not the branches. No animals cried out. That stillness felt worse than any noise ever could. By 0600, Sparks finally had something. Signals 2 clicks west-southwest. Deep sector, unmapped terrain. Kane nodded. "We'll check it out." He assembled a recon team, himself, Moreira, Dr. Sofia Rojas, the base biologist, Private Neil Harper for Overwatch, and me. Rojas wasn't military, but Kane wanted her along in case we found something living. Her curiosity looked like courage, though I could tell it was neither. We geared up in silence, M16s, sidearms, rations, enough ammunition to survive if the jungle turned hostile. Harper wrapped his rifle scope to keep the humidity out. Rojas packed a field kit and a machete that looked too heavy for her hands. At the gate, Kane gathered us. "Rules are simple," he said. "We observe, we record, we return. No engagement unless fired upon." No assumptions. We nodded, though every man there already knew this wasn't an enemy op. Whatever we were walking toward, it wasn't human. The jungle swallowed us within minutes. Light disappeared beneath the canopy, replaced by a dim green twilight that made it impossible to tell direction. Vines hung like nooses, and the ground exhaled rot with every step. Moreira led the way, machete swinging methodically, eyes reading signs we couldn't see. "Stay close," he warned. "Jungle punishes mistakes." We followed Sparks's handheld receiver, the pulse growing louder with every 100 meters. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. The only sounds were our breathing and that low, steady rhythm leaking from the device on Sparks's vest. After an hour, Harper raised his fist. We froze. He pointed ahead, and through the vines, I saw shapes, tall, thin, arranged in a perfect circle. At first, I thought they were trees. Then my eyes adjusted. They were wooden poles, 10 feet high, carved with strange symbols that seemed to twist when you looked directly at them. In the center sat a mound of earth, perfectly round, stones laid in precise rings. Rojas stepped forward, brushing soil from the nearest stone. "This isn't natural," she murmured. Kane scanned the perimeter. "How old?" She shook her head. "Hard to tell. Months, maybe years. It's been undisturbed for a while." Moreira moved around the circle, his face dark with recognition. "Old magic," he muttered. "Older than the tribes. We shouldn't be here." Kane ignored him. "Sparks, signal strength?" Sparks stared at his receiver. "Stronger, much stronger. It's close." That was when I felt it, pressure in my chest like the air itself was pushing back. The pulse wasn't just sound anymore, it was movement inside us. Harper gritted his teeth, hand to his sternum. Rojas swayed on her feet, eyes glassy. "Captain," I said, "we need to pull out." Kane hesitated, calculation flickering behind his eyes. Then he nodded. "Mark it, we'll regroup with reinforcements." Relief swept through me, until Rojas gasped. "Bones," she whispered. She was kneeling beside the mound, hands shaking. "There are bones in the soil." Kane drew his pistol. "What kind?" Rojas lifted a fragment from the dirt. It looked human, a rib maybe, but the structure was off, too thin, too porous, jointed in ways that defied anatomy. She uncovered more, a femur twisted the wrong way, vertebrae with extra joints, a skull fragment where the eye sockets slanted inward. "Not human," she said. "Not animal. Something in between." The air vibrated harder, the hum deepening to a subsonic tremor. The stones on the mound began to shudder. Moreira backed away. "We leave. Now." Kane didn't argue. "Move." We ran through the undergrowth, the ground trembling beneath us. I didn't look back, though I swear I could feel something waking behind us, something vast and aware. By the time the base came into view, my lungs burned. Kane locked the gate himself, sweat streaking his face. "All personnel, condition red," he ordered over comms. "No one leaves perimeter. Sparks, kill that frequency." Sparks reached for the controls, but the hum didn't stop. It grew louder, and that's when I realized the worst truth of all. The sound wasn't coming from the forest anymore. It was coming from inside the base. Kane froze, his expression hardening to stone. "Secure all entry points," he said quietly. "Full lockdown. Nobody sleeps alone tonight." The rest of that day blurred into one long, sleepless rotation of repairs, checks, and whispered prayers. We sealed every window, welded the vents, and reinforced the generator shed with spare plating. The base had been built to keep out men, not whatever was pulsing beneath our feet. The jungle outside lay still, heavy with fog that refused to move even when the wind kicked up. Every breath of air smelled like iron and mildew. Captain Kane kept his calm, his voice clipped and deliberate, but I could see the tension behind his eyes. Sparks was back at the console trying to block the frequency, fingers twitching with caffeine and fear. He'd rerouted every power circuit twice, pulled the main antenna offline, and still the signal came through. The heartbeat never stopped. It vibrated in the floor, the walls, in the steel bunks, until it felt like the entire base had a pulse of its own. Moreira sat cross-legged on his bunk, rosary moving through his fingers, murmuring to something unseen. Dr. Rojas was in the medical bay, bent over the bones she'd recovered from the mound. She hadn't slept either. Every few minutes, her voice came over the comms, half to herself, dictating notes about cellular structure, porosity, density, trying to anchor her sanity in science. I made rounds of the perimeter with 2 others. Every shadow looked wrong. Every reflection in the fog felt like it was staring back. By 2100 hours, the power flickered. Lights dimmed, came back in red emergency mode. The hum from the generators deepened, off rhythm with the heartbeat that had taken residence inside the base. Sparks's voice broke through the static on comms, higher pitched than usual. "Captain, I can't block it. The signals, it's using our own equipment." Kane was already on his feet. "Shut down all non-essential systems," he ordered. "Power down the comms if you have to." But it was too late. The sound had spread, through the wiring, the floor grates, the air itself. You could feel it crawling inside your ribs. And beneath that steady thump came whispers, real words now, faint and warped, syllables that scraped against the edges of comprehension. The voices weren't outside trying to get in. They were inside, using the base like a throat. I was on outer patrol when the first soldier broke. Private Mills, youngest of us, still soft in the face. He froze mid-step, rifle slack at his side, staring into the jungle beyond the fence. "Mills," I said, nudging him. "Stay with me." He didn't blink. His lips were moving, shaping words I couldn't hear. Then he turned, eyes glassy, skin pale like wax. "They're calling," he whispered. "They know my name." I grabbed him by the shoulder, shook hard. His body jerked like I'd shocked him. For one moment his eyes cleared, terror spilling in. "They're inside my head," he said, telling me to open the gate. Before I could answer, every alarm in the base went off. The motion sensors screamed red across the board. Kane's voice snapped through comms. "All units, defensive positions. Harper, report." The sniper's reply came through static, tight and controlled. "No visuals, sir. But the fog's moving wrong, it's pushing against the wind." I lifted my rifle, scanning the perimeter. The fog thickened around the fence, curling through the razor wire like it had a mind. For a second, I thought I saw shapes within it, tall, elongated, swaying like reeds underwater. Then the first camera feed went dark. One by one, the monitors blinked out, until only static filled the room. The fog touched the first building, and lights inside began to strobe. Rojas's voice cut in, panicked but steady enough to understand. "Captain, the bone samples, they're fresh. Not fossilized, days old. And the DNA, partly human, but altered, hybridized." There was a pause. "It's still alive out there." Kane didn't hesitate. "Meaning?" "Meaning whatever made those bones is moving, and it's using the signal to control biological hosts." His next words came out like stone. "Then it's not just a transmission. It's an infection." The fog reached the comms building. It crawled under doors and through vents like liquid. The temperature dropped. My breath came out in white plumes, and the walls trembled with each pulse. The voices were clearer now, chanting in unison, a call and response that made my stomach twist. We fired through the windows when the first silhouettes appeared. Bullets tore through the mist, but the figures didn't fall. They walked like men drowning in air, their limbs jerking out of sync with the rhythm of their steps. The moment light hit them, I saw faces, familiar faces, men from our base. Their skin stretched thin, eyes clouded but aware, mouths opening and closing with the heartbeat's tempo. Mills was the first to stop firing. His rifle dropped. He stepped forward, expression empty. "Mills!" I shouted. "Hold position," but he didn't even look back. He climbed the gate ladder, hands moving with eerie calm, and disappeared into the fog. His scream followed seconds later, high, short, and cut off. "Fall back," Kane's voice thundered. "All surviving personnel, to the comms room." We ran. Boots slammed metal. The fog followed, pressing through corridors like a living tide. Morera dragged a wounded soldier whose leg had been caught in shrapnel. Harper covered our retreat, every shot perfect, precise, futile. Rojas stumbled in behind me, clutching her med kit, her lab coat streaked with something dark. When the last of us made it inside, Kane sealed the door and shoved a metal crate against it. 8 survivors left: Kane, Morera, Harper, Rojas, Sparks, me, and 2 privates whose names I can't even remember now. The pounding began almost immediately. Dozens of fists hitting the steel, rhythmic, relentless. The same rhythm as the transmission. Inside, the air felt charged, vibrating with the same frequency that had infected our machines. Sparks was working the console again, trying to raise command. Only static replied. The whispers layered under it, words shaping into meaning I almost understood before my brain rejected them. Kane gathered us in the center of the room. "Extraction's not coming," he said flatly. "We hold here till dawn. If comms are still down, we improvise." Morera shook his head. "You can't fight this, Captain. We woke something that was meant to stay asleep. Kane didn't flinch. Then we put it back down. Dr. Rojas raised her voice. It's not supernatural, she said, trembling. It's biological. Some kind of organism that affects neural pathways through sound. It uses frequencies to hijack motor control. If it spreads beyond this base, it won't stop. How do we kill it? Kane demanded. She hesitated. Maybe fire. Or if we can sever its connection to the mound, the source. Kane made his decision in an instant. At first light, we go back. We burn it to ash. We all knew dawn was too far away. The pounding on the door grew louder, metal groaning under the strain. I could see it bending inward, bolts rattling. I raised my rifle, but my hands were slick with sweat. Then I saw movement through the small glass slit near the hinge. Faces, pressed close to the window, eyes unfocused and mouths moving silently in unison. At the front stood Mills. His uniform hung torn, chest riddled with bullet holes that didn't bleed. His head tilted at an impossible angle, but his eyes, God, his eyes were still alive, trapped, pleading. Hold the line. Kane barked, voice hard enough to drown the fear. Whatever happens, we hold the line. The metal shrieked. Rivets snapped. And through the gap forming in the door, the fog poured in, carrying with it the stench of decay and the sound of 100 heartbeats beating as one. In that instant, I understood what Moreira meant. The jungle didn't forgive mistakes. And tonight, it had come to collect. The door burst inward with a metallic scream, hinges tearing loose as the wall of fog crashed through. Kane opened fire first, muzzle flash lighting the room like strobe lightning. The figures that poured in didn't duck or hesitate, they just advanced, jerking forward with the rhythm of the pulse that filled the air. Bullets tore through them, shredding flesh and uniform alike, but they didn't fall until their bodies simply failed under the weight of destruction. Mills was among them, half his face missing, his eyes burning with that terrible awareness. Sparks screamed, clapping his hands over his ears as if trying to block out something only he could hear. The transmission had grown deafening, layered voices speaking through his mouth in a language made of pain. Kane fired until his rifle clicked dry, then switched to his sidearm. The air filled with cordite and rot. Harper was shouting from the corner, controlled bursts cutting down silhouettes that twitched and rose again. Moreira clutched his rosary so tightly his knuckles split, prayers drowned out by the pounding heartbeat. The infected kept coming, crawling over their own dead, mouths opening wider than should be possible, their teeth chattering in time with the rhythm that now seemed to vibrate through our very bones. Sparks convulsed, collapsing to his knees. The sound coming out of him wasn't human anymore. It was every voice from the jungle speaking at once, reverberating through the metal room. Dr. Rojas lunged toward him, screaming his name. We need to get him out. He's a beacon. They're using him. There's no out anymore, one of the privates said softly. His rifle lowered, his eyes glazing as he whispered, they're calling us home. Kane spun, weapon raised. Stand down, soldier. But the private only smiled, serene, as he dropped his rifle and walked straight into the tide of bodies. The infected parted for him like he'd always belonged. I saw him turn once before the fog swallowed him, his face slack, peaceful, as if he'd found something we couldn't. Seal the door. Kane barked. We slammed the inner barrier shut, a reinforced steel partition meant to withstand explosives. The clang echoed through the compound. For a moment, everything was still except the sound of our own ragged breathing. Then the pounding began again, measured, rhythmic, as though dozens of fists had become one collective drum. The floor trembled beneath us. Dust fell from the ceiling. Kane crouched by Sparks, who was still shaking, blood seeping between his fingers. Corporal, he said, gripping him by the vest, report. Sparks's eyes rolled back, then forward again, focusing on Kane with eerie clarity. The mound, it's not the source, he rasped. Just an amplifier. The real signal, it's beneath. Miles down. Something ancient. Rojas knelt beside him, her voice breaking. Beneath what? Sparks's head tilted, bones in his neck cracking audibly. All of us, he whispered. It's been calling for decades. Every outpost, every village, every mind that can hear. His lips twisted into a grin that wasn't his. Waiting for enough of us to open the door. Kane shook him violently. What door? Sparks's answer came out as a laugh, a broken, overlapping sound like multiple voices sharing one throat. Then his eyes cleared for a fleeting second. "Sir," he gasped, "kill me before it uses me." Kane didn't hesitate. One shot. Clean. Sparks fell silent mid-syllable. The room went still again, the sudden quiet heavier than the noise had been. Moreira crossed himself, whispering, "Dios los guard." But the pounding outside grew louder, as if the act had enraged whatever intelligence was directing it. "How long will that hold?" Kane asked. Harper checked the door mechanism, his face grim. 24 hours under normal assault. But that's not what this is. The metal groaned in answer. 6 hours, Moreira said quietly. Maybe less. Kane looked around at what remained of his command, 5 souls left, him, me, Moreira, Harper, and Dr. Rojas. The math didn't add up. It never did. "Doctor," he said, "you mentioned fire." Rojas swallowed hard, forcing her thoughts into coherence. The organism functions like a fungal network. The bones, the bodies, their nodes, all connected through the soil. Fire would disrupt it. If we burn the mound, we might sever its reach. Might? Kane pressed. "It's all we've got," she said. He was silent for a long moment, listening to the thudding outside, the heartbeat syncing perfectly with the tremor in the floor. Finally, he said, "The equipment shed on the east perimeter has flamethrowers, thermite, demolition packs. It's 50 meters through open ground." Harper didn't sugarcoat it. "That's a suicide run." "Maybe," Kane said. "But if even one of us makes it, we have a chance. Sitting here, we die for nothing." Moreira stepped forward. "I'll go. I know the jungle better than anyone." Kane shook his head. "No. If we fail, you're the only one who can find a way out, warn whoever's left." His gaze shifted to Harper. "You take the tower. Cover fire." Harper nodded. "Yes, sir." Then Kane looked at me and Rojas. "You two make the run. I'll draw them off." "Sir," I started, but he cut me off. "That's an order." The pounding grew to a deafening roar. Cracks spiderwebbed across the steel. We could see fingers pushing through gaps in the welds, skin tearing as they forced their way closer. Kane placed his hand over the release lever. "On my mark, you run. Don't look back." My stomach turned to stone. Harper braced at the window, rifle trained on the corridor. Moreira gripped his rosary, whispering one final prayer. Rojas checked her sidearm, hands trembling. I adjusted my rifle sling and nodded at Kane. "Ready." He gave one last look at us, me, Rojas, his soldiers, and for a heartbeat, I saw not command but sorrow. "Mark," he shouted, slamming the lever down. The door exploded outward. The fog surged in. Kane charged headlong into it, firing full auto, a human beacon of noise and fury. The creatures turned toward him instantly, drawn like insects to flame. He screamed, not in fear, but in defiance, a sound that cut through the heartbeat for the briefest instant. "Go!" Rojas shouted. We ran. Bullets cracked behind us, Harper's rifle punching precise holes through the mist. Figures lunged out of the fog, limbs jerking at wrong angles. I fired until the magazine clicked empty, reloaded, kept moving. One of the shapes fell at my feet, half its skull missing, yet its hand still reached for me. I kicked it aside and dragged Rojas forward. The air was alive with the sound of screams, metal splitting, gunfire. Then, for a fraction of a second, the noise dimmed, and I knew Kane was gone. We reached the equipment shed just as the fog reached us. I slammed the door shut and dropped the locking bar. Inside was chaos, racks of weapons, crates of ammunition, and, on the far wall, 2 flamethrower units hanging like relics. Rojas was already moving, pulling one down, fumbling with the straps. "Help me," she gasped. I grabbed the second, muscle memory taking over from training long buried. The fuel tank's weight settled on my shoulders, the ignition system hissing faintly as I primed it. "Pressure's good," I said. Rojas checked hers, face pale but steady. "Thermite charges," she muttered, ripping open a crate. She shoved handfuls into her pack along with a timer detonator. "For the mound, if fire isn't enough." Outside, Harper's rifle cracked again and again, each shot echoing like a heartbeat of its own. The comms were silent now, Kane's voice was gone. "He bought us time," Rojas whispered, almost reverent. I couldn't answer. I just nodded, throat tight. We loaded as much thermite as we could carry. The pounding began at the door again. Metal bent inward, hinges groaning. Rojas looked at me, eyes wide but determined. "4 mils," she said. I nodded. "For all of them." The lock snapped. The fog began to pour through the cracks. I gripped the flamethrower's trigger. "We move on 3. She nodded. 1. The door split. 2. The heartbeat grew deafening. 3. We opened the door and unleashed fire. Twin streams of flame cut through the fog, setting the air itself ablaze. The infected ignited like dry paper, their bodies thrashing but silent, eyes finally losing that tortured awareness as they turned to ash. The jungle outside glowed orange through the haze. The fog recoiled, pulling back from the heat. For the first time in hours, the heartbeat faltered, skipping a beat like a living thing in pain. "Keep burning," I shouted. Rojas's voice came back through the roar. "Then we find the mound. We end it." We tore through the fog like human torches, the flamethrowers spitting gouts of burning fuel that carved temporary corridors through the smoke. Every burst illuminated what the jungle had become, metal twisted by heat, corpses half melted into the mud, walls scrawled with those impossible geometric carvings that seemed to shimmer when you stared too long. The base was gone, what remained was something between ruin and living tissue. The flames reflected off wet surfaces that looked like muscle under the charred steel. Rojas stayed close, her flamethrower's light flickering against her mask, sweat cutting lines through the soot on her cheeks. "Keep moving west," I shouted over the roar. "The gate's still open." Harper's voice crackled in my earpiece, faint under the interference. "Tower secure, for now. You've got clear line of sight to the perimeter." Kane's down, but he took a dozen with him. I didn't let myself feel the weight of that sentence. Not yet. There'd be time later, if we lived long enough for later to exist. We pushed past the wreckage of the mess hall, through a corridor of broken lights that pulsed erratically in the smoke. The air was thick with melted plastic and blood. The infected that weren't burning crawled, pulling themselves across the floor, hands leaving streaks of black fluid that hissed when it touched the fire. Some still wore fragments of uniforms, faces we recognized beneath the deformities. Rojas's breath hitched, but she kept her aim steady. Every time her flame swept across them, they went quiet, not screaming, just extinguishing like candle wicks. The silence that followed each kill felt heavier than the sound of the fire. We reached the outer fence. The razor wire hung in shreds, torn open by something too strong for human hands. Beyond it stretched the jungle, dense and waiting. The fog drifted between the trees, glowing faintly with the same pale blue bioluminescence we'd seen around the mound. Rojas reloaded her fuel, her voice hoarse. "Half tank left." I checked mine, barely more. "Enough to reach the clearing," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. The heartbeat had returned, distant but insistent, guiding us west like a beacon we couldn't ignore. Morera's voice came through comms, steady but strained. "I see you. Red chem lights ahead. Follow the markers I dropped from the tower. They'll lead you straight in." I looked up and spotted the faint red glow flickering between the vines. "Copy," I said. "We're moving." Rojas adjusted her straps and nodded once. "Stay close," I told her. She met my gaze. "If we get separated, we're both dead." There was no arguing with that. We crossed into the jungle, and immediately the air changed. The noise of battle faded behind us, swallowed by the humid silence. The canopy overhead turned the world green and black. Each step sank into mud that sucked at our boots. The fog pulsed in time with the heartbeat, rolling through the trees like breath. My mind kept insisting there was movement between the trunks, shapes just outside the edge of vision, but every time I turned, there was only mist. We followed the red lights deeper, each one flickering weaker than the last, until it felt like we were descending into the belly of something alive. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, the jungle opened into a clearing. The mound stood at its center, larger now, maybe twice the size we'd seen before. The poles surrounding it glowed faintly, carved lines emitting a cold blue light that throbbed with every pulse of the heartbeat. The earth itself seemed to breathe, the surface shifting subtly under the layer of bones that now covered it. Rojas moved ahead, her face caught between awe and horror. "They're from our men," she whispered. "Fresh." She crouched, brushing aside a ribcage to reveal a patch of soil. The organism's converting organic matter into structure. "It's building something." I scanned the scene. "Building what?" She pointed at the mound's apex. "That. It's not a burial site. It's architecture, a gateway." I approached the base of the mound, flamethrower aimed low. The hum deepened the closer I got, the air vibrating against my chest like a living drum. I saw it then, the pattern on the stones wasn't random. The arrangement formed a spiral converging toward a hollow at the center, a hole descending into perfect darkness. From that hole came the heartbeat, so loud now it distorted my vision. The jungle around us swayed though there was no wind. "We set the thermite along the perimeter," I said, forcing the words out. "We burn everything above ground, collapse it, and pray that's enough." Rojas nodded, snapping open her pack. We worked fast, planting charges in a wide ring around the mound, the timers set for 2 minutes. My hands shook as I armed the last one. The ground vibrated harder, as if whatever was beneath had realized what we were doing. The blue glow flared brighter. Movement caught my eye at the tree line. Shapes emerged, tall, thin, not infected soldiers but something beyond them. Their proportions were wrong, limbs too long, spines arched backward. Their skin reflected the same blue as the carvings. Their faces were almost human but stretched, distorted, mouths frozen open like masks of anguish. They moved in perfect synchronization, their steps echoing the pulse. "We're out of time," Rojas said, voice cracking. She set the detonator timer. 60 seconds. "That's not enough to clear the blast radius," I said. She met my eyes, understanding and resignation mingled there. "We're not getting out anyway." The first of the creatures stepped into the clearing, head cocked like it was listening to our heartbeats. "Then we make sure it's worth it," I said, gripping my flamethrower. The horde advanced, 20, no, 30 of them, closing in with mechanical grace. I squeezed the trigger. Fire erupted, washing over the nearest figures. They ignited instantly, blue light turning orange, shadows writhing across the mound. The others didn't stop. They kept walking, some still burning, bodies collapsing and reforming in the same motion. The air became an inferno, the heat so intense it warped the edges of sight. Rojas stood beside me, firing in wide arcs, her face lit by the flames. The timer on her wrist flashed red, 20 seconds. "Back to back." I shouted. We turned, sweeping the clearing, our flames joining into a single storm. The mound cracked under the pressure, stones tumbling as the hole widened, light spilling from below like the heart of a volcano. The creatures screamed, high, harmonic sounds that pierced the air like broken glass. 10 seconds. Rojas yelled. Keep burning. I did. I burned until the air itself screamed, until my fuel gauge hit empty and the trigger clicked dry. The charges went off all at once. A white flash consumed everything. The blast lifted us off the ground and threw us into the trees. The world vanished into sound and heat and light. When I hit the ground, the breath was torn from my lungs. The earth shook like an animal dying. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Rojas's voice faintly. It's collapsing. The mound imploded, dragging the poles and bones inward as if the jungle itself were swallowing its mistake. The hole sealed under a molten crust that hissed and steamed, glowing red before cooling to black. And then, for the first time since the signal began, the heartbeat stopped. The silence that followed was so absolute it felt unnatural. Rojas fell to her knees, sobbing into her mask. I staggered to my feet, staring at the smoking ruin. The creatures that had reached us were gone, there remains nothing but ash and charred impressions on the soil. Above us, the fog thinned, revealing a slice of dawn bleeding over the canopy. We did it, I whispered, though I wasn't sure whether I believed it or was trying to. The jungle didn't answer. It just stood there, ancient and patient, as if waiting to see whether the silence would last. When I opened my eyes again, daylight was cutting through the smoke. The air stank of ash and scorched earth. Every breath scraped my throat like sandpaper. My ears still rang from the blast, but beneath the ringing was something beautiful: silence. Real silence. No pulse, no whisper, no vibration under the ground. The jungle was just a jungle again. I rolled onto my side, groaning as every muscle protested. The clearing was a blackened crater now, its center sealed by cooled rock. The geometric carvings were gone, the poles reduced to stumps of charcoal. The soil steamed faintly, the heat rising like breath from something that had finally stopped struggling. Rojas was slumped nearby, her flamethrower half buried under fallen branches. I crawled to her and shook her shoulder. She coughed, blinking against the glare. Still here? I asked, voice rough. She gave a small, broken laugh. For now. We sat there for a long time, staring at what was left. Around the perimeter, the bones had disintegrated into dust. Whatever network had held them together was gone, burned out of existence. Rojas reached into her pack and pulled out a small detector, its needle trembling weakly. Electromagnetic readings are normal, she said. No anomalies, no interference. I exhaled shakily. Then it's over. She didn't answer right away. For this site, maybe. She was right. The thought lodged itself deep in my chest, the realization that this was just one node in a chain that could stretch for miles. Still, in that moment, the silence felt like victory. Morera's voice came through the comms, fuzzy but alive. I see smoke. Is that you? I grabbed my headset. It's us. Sight neutralized. There was a long pause, then a laugh that broke into a sob. Gracias a Dios. Extractions inbound, 30 minutes. I'm coming to you. The words washed over me like cool water. 30 minutes until a helicopter cut through the trees and lifted us away from this hell. It sounded impossible, like a promise made to someone else. Rojas pressed a trembling hand to her forehead, wiping soot from her face. We actually did it, she murmured. I nodded. Cain bought us the time. Morera arrived before the choppers did, crashing through the undergrowth like a ghost resurrected. His face was streaked with dirt and tears. He took one look at the crater, crossed himself 3 times, and pulled us both into a fierce embrace. He'd be proud, he said. He'd tell you this was worth every drop of blood. I wanted to believe him. We watched the sky together, waiting for the thump of rotor blades. When it finally came, distant but growing, I felt my chest loosen for the first time in days. The sound didn't mimic a heartbeat anymore, it was mechanical, human, salvation. The helicopter burst through the canopy, wind flattening the smoke into a spiral. As we lifted off, the jungle shrank beneath us. From above, the clearing looked like a scar on the earth, black, circular, final. I should have felt relief, but all I could think about was how small it looked, how easily it could be hidden again under the vines. The thought made my stomach twist. The three of us didn't speak on the ride out. The noise of the blades drowned out everything, and maybe that was mercy. I stared down until the clearing vanished into the endless green. Rojas's eyes were closed, her lips moving soundlessly, repeating something like a mantra. Moreira clutched the side rail, knuckles white. We didn't celebrate. You don't celebrate when you've only survived what's still waiting. Back at the forward operations outpost, men met us with stretchers and questions. They looked at us like we'd come back from another planet. Rojas was taken to medical, Moreira to debriefing. I sat on the tarmac in borrowed fatigues, still smelling of gasoline and burnt flesh, staring at the tree line. Somewhere beyond that horizon lay the ruins of the base, 34 men who'd never come home. I tried to picture Kane's last moments, holding that line against the impossible. I hoped he'd known we made it out. The official debriefing lasted weeks. We were kept separate, questioned by men who never gave names. They asked the same things again and again. What did you hear? What did you see? What caused the hallucinations? They talked about chemical warfare, jungle toxins, heat stress. I told them everything. Every word, every sound, every face. They wrote it down without expression. When it was over, they handed us papers thicker than Bibles, non-disclosure agreements, final pay settlements, medical evaluations stamped, PTSD, severe. Operation Night Harvest was erased. The documents called it an unauthorized reconnaissance incident with high casualty rate due to environmental exposure. The phrase was so clean it made me sick. They sent us home after that, each to our own quiet corners of the world. I thought the silence would comfort me. Instead, it followed me like an echo. I'd wake in the night certain I felt vibration through the floor, certain I heard faint pulses hiding beneath the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of a clock. Sometimes, in traffic, a low rhythm would rise beneath the engines and my breath would seize. The doctors called it trauma response. Maybe it was. But sometimes I'd catch Rojas's eyes across a debriefing room or Moreira's glance when someone mentioned static on a radio, and I'd see the same flicker of doubt. The same unspoken thought. We'd silenced one signal, yes, but what if there were more? 3 months passed before the silence became unbearable. Civilian life felt like a foreign country, streets too neat, people too loud, the world too bright. I tried to disappear into routine, morning coffee, evening walks, pretending the rhythm of daily noise wasn't hiding another rhythm beneath it. But some nights, when everything else went still, I swore I could feel it again, a faint pulse buried under the quiet, steady and patient, like something waiting to be acknowledged. I told myself it was memory, nothing more. Then the message arrived. A simple note slipped under my apartment door, coffee, followed by coordinates. I almost threw it away until I saw the handwriting, Dr. Sofia Rojas. She was waiting for me in a diner 2 blocks from my place. She looked older, thinner, the sharpness in her eyes dulled by sleepless nights but not gone. Her coffee sat untouched, going cold. "You look like hell," I said. She managed a weary smile. I could say the same. We didn't waste time on small talk. She opened a folder and spread photographs across the table, satellite images, geological surveys, reports stamped classified in red. "These are from my contacts at the university," she said quietly. After the operation, I started digging, literally. Cross-referencing seismic anomalies, unexplained disappearances, unauthorized military quarantines. And I found them. She pointed at the images, 17 different locations across the Amazon basin, each marked by circular clearings, geometric patterns, and electromagnetic interference. 17 sites. All identical to the mound we destroyed. My stomach turned cold. How long have they been there? She slid another page toward me, a carbon dating report. Some recent, within 50 years. Others, she tapped the paper. 2,000 years old. I stared at her. You're saying this thing's been active since before recorded history? Not active, she said. Dormant. Waiting. And we woke it up. She leaned in, voice low. Whatever we burned was one node in a network. You felt it too, the signal didn't stop when the mound collapsed. It just went quiet. Like something holding its breath. I wanted to argue, but the memory of that faint vibration under my apartment floor silenced me. Who else knows? I asked. No one, she said bitterly. The military buried the files. Academia calls it folklore. The people who fund me think I'm chasing ghosts. But it's real. I can prove it. She opened her bag and pulled out a recorder. A faint hiss filled the speaker, then, underneath it, the unmistakable rhythm of the heartbeat. My pulse spiked. Where did you get that? Brazilian field team, she said. 30 miles from one of the sites. They vanished 2 days after this recording. Local authorities said it was a landslide. She looked up at me, eyes wide and hollow. You know it wasn't. I stared at the tabletop, the formica pattern twisting into the same spirals I'd seen on the stones. What do you want from me? I asked finally. Help, she said. Moreira's still alive. He's been tracking the signals from the south, mapping their spread. We think we found the central point. All 17 locations form a rough circle around one place, deep in uncharted territory. If we destroy that, maybe we shut them all down. I didn't answer right away. The thought of going back into that jungle, of hearing that sound again, made my chest tighten. And if we don't? I asked. Then it keeps spreading, she said. Slowly, quietly, until another team, another country, another generation stumbles on it. And next time, maybe no one comes back. She reached into her coat and slid a photograph across the table. It was Captain Kane in his dress uniform, metals catching the light, eyes steady even on paper. He gave us a chance, she said. We owe it to him to finish what he started. For a long time, I just stared at Kane's face. The memory of his last scream still echoed somewhere behind my ribs. When do we leave? I asked. Relief softened her shoulders. 2 months. We'll need supplies, funding, cover identities. Moreira has contacts in Manaus who can get us through without official paperwork. She handed me a file of coordinates. I'll handle logistics. You handle the rest. I almost laughed. You mean survive? That too. The next weeks blurred into preparation. Rojas moved through it like a machine, research, permits, falsified maps. I trained again, old habits returning with muscle memory I'd hoped to forget. Moreira arrived from Brazil looking older, his hair gone white at the temples, but his eyes still sharp. He carried hand-drawn charts, sketches of sites that matched Rojas's data almost perfectly. They're connected, he said, spreading the maps across the table. Each one built on a fault line, like roots feeding something deeper. But this, he pointed to the center of the map, a blank space where the jungle canopy was too dense for satellites. This is where it all leads. The source. None of us said it out loud, but we all felt it, the same fear that we hadn't won anything back then, only delayed it. Harper's sister sent me a letter a week before departure. She'd found one among his belongings, written before his death. His handwriting was neat, deliberate, the silence is worse than the sound. I hear them every night. By the time you read this, I'll have answered. Don't follow me. Rojas read it once and handed it back, her voice barely a whisper. We're not following him. We're making sure no one else has to. We left in late February, just 3 people carrying enough equipment for 10, traveling under tourist visas and forged credentials. The flight into Manaus felt almost peaceful, like the calm before artillery fire. From there, we took a boat west, the river narrowing as the jungle thickened. Every mile deeper felt like crossing into another world, one that hadn't forgiven us for surviving. But this time, there was no command, no orders, no false promise of safety. Just the 3 of us, the weight of what we'd done, and the certainty that if we failed again, no one would ever know why the world went quiet. The journey into the interior took 22 days. Every mile upriver stripped away another layer of civilization until all that was left was the pulse of paddles and the endless hum of insects. The jungle felt different this time, not hostile, just watchful, as if it remembered us. By the second week, the air tasted metallic again, faintly electric, and the compass began to drift. Rojas documented everything, her field notes filling page after page with measurements, sketches, and quiet dread. Morera led the way from the bow, machete slicing through vines, his shoulders tense under the humid weight of the canopy. I stayed behind him, rifle slung, eyes scanning the trees for movement that never quite resolved into shape. At night, we made camp on high ground and avoided firelight. The jungle's noises were loud, alive, monkeys, frogs, wind, but every now and then they'd cut off all at once, and in the sudden silence I'd feel that old pressure behind my ribs, faint but familiar, as if the earth itself was listening. On the 22nd morning, we reached the coordinates. The forest simply ended, no gradual thinning, just an abrupt wall of trees opening onto a massive sinkhole. It stretched nearly 200 meters across, the interior lost to shadow. Vines as thick as cables hung down the sides, vanishing into blackness. Around the rim, carved directly into the stone, were the same geometric spirals we'd seen years ago, only older, eroded but still pulsing faintly with bioluminescent veins. Rojas knelt, running a gloved hand over one of the carvings. These markings predate any known civilization, she murmured. Whatever made this, it wasn't human. Morera crossed himself. The heart, he said. We found it. We set up equipment along the edge, sensors, sonar, seismic readers. Rojas powered them on and frowned at the display. Depth reading exceeds 5 kilometers. There's structure down there, regular formations, straight lines. This isn't natural. She looked at me, the fear in her eyes unspoken but clear. Something's moving, Morera said. I followed his gaze into the pit. Far below, faint lights shifted in patterns, pulses of blue gliding through the darkness like the slow beat of a living organ. The air around us began to vibrate. Dust lifted off the stone, floating in rhythmic bursts. It knows we're here, Rojas whispered. The heartbeat we'd silenced years ago had returned, deeper, heavier, resonating through our bones. Set the charges, I said. We worked quickly, planting thermite bundles around the rim, attaching timers and detonator lines. The ground trembled with each step, and I could feel warmth rising from below, the smell of ozone thickening until every breath felt like lightning. 15 minutes, Rojas said. We have to move at least a kilometer before detonation. A low groan echoed up from the pit, so deep it made my vision shake. Too late for that, Morera muttered. Cracks spread across the rock beneath our boots, widening into fractures that glowed blue from within. The pattern on the ground wasn't random, it was a vast sigil, one we'd been standing in the center of since we arrived. The first eruption came from the far side, a jet of vapor blasting into the air, followed by a sound like an ocean inhaling. Run! I shouted. We scrambled through the trees as the sinkhole began to collapse behind us. Branches whipped our faces, roots caught our boots, but adrenaline kept us upright. The forest heaved underfoot, birds exploding from the canopy in a shrieking cloud. I risked one glance back and saw something rising, massive, shapeless, crawling out of the pit in coils of shifting matter. It wasn't alive in any way I understood. It was the shape of thought given form, patterns folding into themselves, a living geometry. My stomach lurched as every nerve in my body screamed at me not to look. Rojas hit the detonator. The jungle erupted. The explosion was less sound than pressure, a tidal force that knocked us flat and turned the world white. Heat rolled over us in waves, followed by a roar that felt endless. Trees toppled, the ground buckled, and then, gradually, the thunder faded. For a long time, none of us moved. Then Morera stirred, pushing himself upright with shaking hands. "Is it over?" he croaked. Smoke drifted through the ruins of the canopy. Where the sinkhole had been was now a crater filled with shattered stone and molten earth. No light, no pulse, no movement. Rojas pulled out her scanner. The readings were flat. No electromagnetic activity. No sound, she said, voice trembling. We did it. We camped a mile from the blast site that night. The jungle stayed quiet, not the suffocating stillness of before, but the normal quiet of living things. Frogs croaked. Wind stirred the leaves. Life had returned. Rojas sat by the dim glow of her equipment, typing a report that no one would ever read. "We'll need to coordinate with the others," she said softly. "Seal the remaining sites before they wake again." I nodded, staring into the dark where the crater still steamed. "We can bury it," I said, "but we can't erase it." Weeks later, back in civilization, I received a package, no return address, postmarked from an Eastern Bloc archive. Inside was an old reel-to-reel tape and a note, recovered from Soviet records, 1952. "You should hear this." I played it that night. Through static and age, I heard Russian voices describing a transmission in Siberia, identical in pattern to ours. They'd found a mound beneath the permafrost, geometric carvings, soldiers who walked into the ice and never returned. The recording ended with a brief report, site sealed with nuclear charge. Recommend identical treatment for all similar anomalies. My hands shook as the tape spun to silence. It had happened before. Different places, different times, the same call. Rojas phoned me that night. "I got the same package," she said. Her voice was calm but hollow. "It's not just the Amazon or Siberia. There are others, beneath deserts, under oceans, buried under cities. We'll never find them all." I stared out the window at the sleeping skyline, lights blinking like distant signals. "Then we keep sealing the ones we can," I said. "As long as it takes." She hesitated. "Do you think it'll ever stop?" I didn't answer. Outside, traffic passed, each tire hitting a crack in the road with perfect rhythm, a faint, familiar beat. I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "But we'll hold the line." And that's the truth of what happened out there, the story buried under decades of denials and silence. Operation Night Harvest may have ended in 1967, but the echoes of it are still out there, deep beneath the ground, waiting for someone reckless enough to listen. If you've made it this far, remember, some transmissions aren't meant to be answered. If you want to hear more stories like this, real operations twisted by horror, secrets buried in jungles, mountains, and frozen ground, hit the subscribe button, drop a like, and share this with someone who thinks they've heard it all. Stay sharp. Stay curious. And never, ever follow the sound. This is Captain Rebel, signing off.